I finished my degree, or my diploma in nursing in Indiana at Holy Cross, and a doctoral degree. And more recently, I was at the University of Alabama in Birmingham and got my degree in public health with a specialization in maternal and child health. So that's kind of a quick background. I actually have two areas where I do research, and I'll focus, I think, on the second one because it has more connections to biology. The first area that I do research in is psychosocial and behavioral changes after women have given birth. So there's a lot of transition that happens during that period, and often women aren't getting any health care during that period. They may have one office visit. So I'm concerned about how we could do a better job of helping mothers at that stage of their life. But that's less, there's some biology there, but I'll focus on the other area, and that is weight gain associated with pregnancy and then during the postpartum period. The major part of my work there has particularly focused on racial and ethnic differences, particularly among low-income women, in relationship to their weight gain during pregnancy and then afterwards, because usually what happens, and I don't know if you've covered this in your biology class or not, but there is kind of like what's called an obligatory amount of weight gain during pregnancy.
Oh, we don't talk about that.
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic though, because when you have a baby, there are first of all there's the growth of the placenta, the uterus, and many body tissues are really altered. There's an increase in blood volume, so there's a lot of weight gain. So when we say obligatory weight gain, we mean that essential weight gain that would go with having a normal pregnancy. In addition to that, some of the hormonal changes during pregnancy, on average, lead to some amount of fat storage. Some of the thinking about that is that fat storage is provided so that during lactation, when the mother is feeding the baby, she's got a nutrition source to help her meet those needs in relationship to milk production. So weight gain during pregnancy has become much more salient because of the obesity epidemic. And so there's continuing research showing that there's a subset of women who actually gain more weight during pregnancy than what they need to, and then afterwards they may actually retain that weight. So it may be in a small way contributing in some women to the obesity epidemic. So that's the topic I've focused on. Yeah, I think if we look at those changes, for a couple of reasons, if we look at those changes, what happens when you give birth? There's a book, and I don't remember the title of it anymore, but what one of these mothers says is once you give birth, your life will never be the same again. So there's a lot of life alteration that happens, and so particularly for women, one of the things that happens is there's a lot of role obligations that go with it, and it's not women have a choice, or and depending on the culture too, there may be a lot of support for mothers. Like in U.S. culture, I think it's less so. There may be some assistance for the mother for the first 2 weeks, and then, as we say, it's kind of paddle your own canoe. So so we've also found out that, and I don't think we fully understand why some women say have postpartum depression. That would be the big area. We know now they also may have depression during pregnancy. There may be some biological roots to it, and I think that there's some basis for that. But also there's a lot of change, so relationships may change. And also what you have is you have a woman who often is isolated at home, she's staying at home, so she doesn't have the resources. If she's a single mother, she doesn't have the support of a spouse. So, it becomes a very complex situation. And so we're concerned about postpartum and psychosocial factors, both for the health of the woman and her well-being, as well as we know now how critical those first 2 years of life are for psychosocial development. That all the things that a mother does, the talking to the baby, the holding, all that interaction, the eye contact, all of that's so important to the brain development and also the social emotional development of infants. So it's seen as a very critical period in development. But I got interested in the weight gain because with the obesity epidemic, early on they started they raised, actually it was about 1990, they raised the weight gain requirements for many groups of women, and they grouped them into underweight, normal weight, overweight, and obese, and each one got a different amount of weight that they were supposed to gain. So they used the scientific literature to set those limits. But even for the normal weight women, they got to gain more weight. But then they said, okay, we're trying to make sure we reduce low birth weight in infants, but we don't know what the impact of these new weight gain guidelines will be in relationship to obesity in women. And so that's when I really got interested in it, even though my background up to that time was primarily what I would call psychosocial.
Could you explain a biological process in pregnancy for us, like the basic biological process?
Well, I'll just go through just a quick sketch of it. Is the first 3 months of pregnancy are called it. It's like pregnancy is set up in like 3 trimesters, and those would be usually 3 months as we think of calendar months, or it also could be 10 if we use lunar months, which would be just 28-day months. Then it's a 10-month pregnancy, but if you do it by our calendar months, so it's about, I think, what is it, 240 days or something like that. So during the first period of pregnancy, the fetus is like very micro, But what happens during that critical period is that's when we have what's called organogenesis, which means this is when the organs are actually formed and developed, but in a very small stage. And so that's a very vulnerable stage. But in terms of the biological changes in the mother, the hormones start very early. So you have changes in breast tissue, the size of the uterus. There's also changes in blood volume that are actually happening. And these are anticipating the needs of the fetus later on. So there's a lot of biological changes in the mother in the first. And then you have, increasingly, what happens is the fetus is growing in size and, development down the road, I guess in terms of just fetal size increasing. Let's see, the other process that happens is, and I'll just touch on this briefly, is about mid-pregnancy there are metabolic changes as well. And one of those is to kind of create a state of insulin resistance, to kind of elevate the blood sugar in the mother to increase the glucose that's being transported to the fetus. During that stage, women who have a susceptibility to diabetes may actually develop a phenomenon known as gestational diabetes. So that's kind of just a quick sketch of pregnancy and some of the things that happen. So usually, like in the 3rd trimester, a lot of the weight gain there is primarily fetal growth and not these biological changes in the mother, unless there's some complication. Does that give you a quick idea?
Yeah, that's interesting.
And just one thing with the Zika that's really interesting here is, I'll have to go back and look, and I checked with some of my friends in public health. Normally with an infection, we're really concerned during that first 3 months because of, again, organogenesis. But what they're finding with Zika is that it may continue to have other kinds of effects throughout the pregnancy, so it isn't just those first 3 months, and that's what really is making it, I think, particularly scary.
Next question is just what I'm very interested in. Do you think can babies communicate with their mother before they were born?
Oh, yeah, I think there's really, there's at least evidence that they're responsive, because what they will do is they've actually produced sounds and then look to see if fetal movement is related to that, and it is. And so the babies also hear the heartbeat during the mother, of course, and so there's actually some, I haven't seen it recently, but I'd seen it previously, where you have these heartbeats that you play to the baby, and it's supposed to help the baby, feel more kind of relaxed after. Yeah, this is really interesting. We think of recognition of the mother as the mother or the caregiver. That happens. Let's see. I'll have to check my dates on this. I'm thinking about. About 8 months, they have a thing called, they will have like a little bit of stranger anxiety. So it's in the latter part of the first year that they have developed what we call a schema, which is a kind of a picture. And so So they may actually be afraid of strangers because they recognize the differences now. And then gradually this leads to this process called attachment, where they use the mother or the father, the parents, people they feel secure with, they use them as kind of a secure base. So if you think of this as if the child is like here, and they'll walk a little ways, and then they get a certain distance, and then guess what they do? They turn around and they look. Are you there? Do I feel safe? It's kind of like all of us. We want to have that. We want to know, even if you're away from your family, you think, oh, I want to call my parents or something. I want to have that connection for us. So that's a really important part of the process, but it's even more subtle than that. There's been some research to show that if a mother is breastfeeding early on, what you usually do is kind of like put a breast pad there because sometimes the milk will trickle out. But there's all these aromas that go with it, and so they will, with a very young infant, they'll put the mother's breast pad on one side and another mother's breast pad on the other side, and the baby turns to her own mother. So there's many ways so in a sense it's it maybe isn't recognition of the parent, but it's certainly familiarity, it's association. And so we find that we're still just finding out a lot about how these relationships form, and there's a biological basis, I guess, to some of it. Biological and psychological development, they kind of overlap together. I think what the research has shown is that genetics kind of sets the upper limit, but that environment can guarantee that you reach that limit or you not reach that limit. Let's say, we'll just do the example of piano playing. Let's say you had the gene to do piano playing, but in your home you've never had a piano. So that ability will never be brought to fruition. Another thing that has been shown, for instance, particularly in children who live in situations where they are deprived of a lot of the basic interaction, because I don't know if you've studied much about the fetal brain yet, or infant brain, but there's huge brain development going on. And there's a wonderful book done. I think it's at Harvard. They have a whole project on child development like this. And one of the people heading that wrote this wonderful book called Neurons. I think it's called Neurons to Neighborhoods. And it's trying to show how neurodevelopment depends on context and relationships. There's a lot of things. First of all, their body has to heal. So a lot of changes in the body there are some that, and I don't know if we fully identify them, but certainly body image changes. So that depending on, I think like blood volume, because what they found is that second-time mothers gain less weight than first-time mothers, and I think it's because some of those underlying biological processes have changed. Now, we haven't fully defined what those are, if that's fat storage, because the uterus tends to go back to pretty much its original size. There may be some increase in breast tissue. There could be body fat, but there may be some underlying biological changes that are happening. And I haven't really seen those documented, but I think that the body image would be a psychological, and some women may experience bodily changes as a result of pregnancy in terms of body shape. But there's also big psychological changes that happen too. One of them is you have to wake up very often when the baby cries because the babies need to be fed. So that's the whole idea of now your life is influenced heavily, your schedule, by this new person who's in your life. This is going to be a very odd kind of answer. I think just by opening up new areas, but I happen to go to some Catholic schools, and so as a result of that, you had an automatic minor in philosophy and theology. So I ended up taking philosophy classes, and instead of taking the sciences, I took English literature. So I think what those did is to expand, just awareness and thinking, particularly with philosophy. You have to really look at logic, and there's ethics and all these kind of things, which opens up. It is a good foundation for nursing, actually, because nursing is really working with people. Yeah. So I'm happy for my undergraduate education. Now it's hard for students undergraduate to do a lot of philosophy and literature
Oh,
if they're a
yeah.
science major, isn't it? Yeah, and I feel like that was the strongest part of my undergraduate.
And when you were in college, how did you study biology and achieve a good grade?
Oh, wow. My biology was very basic in nursing school, and so actually I had to teach myself biology when I started, again, new biology, when I actually started doing the work with gestational weight gain or weight gain during pregnancy. And because I found I'll just tell you what I had to teach myself. This is the good news, is if you have a good education, you can increase your knowledge by self-study and just reading a lot. And so what I had to learn to really work with weight and obesity is anthropometry, which is how do you measure body compartments, measuring metabolic rates, the changes between mother and baby during pregnancy. Most of that was already familiar to me, and also epidemiology, which is important, and also got a degree in that, and kind of blend all that with the psychology. Now, my solution or suggestion would be is you're looking at how to master biology. If you can actually link, and this is my experience, if you can link something you're learning to something that's important, that's a real motivator. So I think motivation is one really big thing. If you can think, how can I use this? Why is this important in my life? And the other thing is, look at what, in terms of studying, look at what, you're here at a wonderful university. Look at what has helped you be successful before. I had one person come in one time and told me, you need to totally reorganize your office, because I tend to put things out all over. So I organized it, put everything in shelves, and guess what? I couldn't find anything. So then I thought, okay,
happened to me.
That's the MBA way to do it. I'm not like that. I interact with things. There's a physicality that is a part of how I am successful. And so my suggestion would be, look to see what you've done in the past that feels familiar, that helps you master, and don't look necessarily at what other people are doing, because they could be of a different type from you. Now, some people find study groups helpful, others do not. I always got confused in study groups. Now, sometimes groups are more exciting for where you're trying to come up with new ideas. That can be really helpful and say, gee, I've never thought of that. But it depends how you're learning, and I'm one of those that needs to, in my own brain, figure out exactly how things go together.
Yeah.
That's how my brain works. I didn't choose that. It's like my brain was given to me. So I just have to accept it and work with it and appreciate it when it does work. So that would be my advice, is to really think about yourself and what works for you. I actually, when I was in nursing school, we mainly had anatomy and physiology. And then we would also learn what we call pathophysiology. So that's how do normal biological processes change in relationship to disease. And I thought that was interesting. I wasn't so interested in psychology then. And I don't know how much, I guess it was all the English literature that I studied later on made me want to actually move more to a psychological understanding of people. But I really liked the philosophy as well. Oh, I think that I think that it's just wonderful that you're here at the University of Texas. What would my advice be? Is enjoy your undergraduate experience. I know that UT likes to have students graduate, on time, 4 years. But also look at ways that you can do not just what's required for your degree, but to enrich you as a person. Because you will never have the luxury and the access to what you have right now. Because if you go on to graduate school, the demands are higher. It's very difficult to kind of feed your spirit. And there are many opportunities here in terms of the arts, in terms of people you can meet, and things that you can do in the world. And so I hope in the global health class, it kind of opens up opportunities too.
It's an interesting class.
Yeah, we're very privileged to be here, but there are other people in other places in the world. So it could be there's an area of service that you say, I can't do much right now about this problem, but someday, sometime, I want to have an impact on this. And it could be I want to give time to it. It could be I want to donate wealth I achieve. Or it could be I have some new idea. about how to change things. But I think that the things that are around this university, you know, the lectures, just maybe there's an organization you want to join. I think those are rare opportunities, and it's something not to pass by. I know I had the opportunity here. Let's see, there was like, what is a double helix? It's Watson and Crick, is it? And so I got to hear the opportunity to hear Crick lecture. It's in the biology department, I believe. He was here some years ago, and it was an amazing experience to hear, you know, one of the two authors of the, you know, the double helix kind of thing. Yeah, yeah. So I think don't pass those up if at all possible, and just learn what are the strategies that help you be successful. Because now we're coming to the end of the semester, what, the last 3 to 4, we all know that's crisis. It's crisis for students, crisis for faculty. And so look to see what you can do from what you've learned already to help you be successful during that period, so you're not so anxious about it, and you know, still do well, but maintain your mental health in the process as well. That's what little advice I would have